Stacy and I will be traveling right after Bible class today. I mentioned that to my class. I'm going to have to cut out ASAP because we're going to Huntsville, Alabama for a celebration of life service for a little girl that West Metro has been praying for since she was 2 months old, which was when they found out that she had cancer that they couldn't do anything about. So October 6th, she turned 6 months, and then 3 days later, she went on home. So I put this picture up. I know several have seen it because you hear me talking about it. And celebration of life, that's the right way to do things, isn't it? We use that funeral word, and it's an official term, of course, but celebration of life, to be people, and I appreciate Coach's words just a minute ago. As Christian people, we have everything to celebrate. And life can be difficult, obviously. Life can be painful. Life can send us all sorts of things. Bad financial situations. We may end up with difficult relationships. We may die very young, lose someone very young, very close to us. But because that Savior has been raised from the dead, we can celebrate life. One of my favorite stories, actually a couple of my favorite stories will be in here this morning. Both of them from Luke. Both of them familiar, although I realize maybe not everybody's read these stories. Maybe you've heard the titles of them and you get the gist of what they're about, but maybe you haven't heard. If you haven't, listen, because they're good stories. One of them's going to come later in the sermon. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" And he said to him, "What is written in the law?" We read this recently. How do you read it? And he answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." But he, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied with a story, as he often did. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, when the Samaritan saw the half-dead stranger, he had compassion. He went to him. Two things right there in a row that tell us what's going on. He had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him. And whatever more you spend, I will repay when I come back." Jesus, upon finishing the story, asked this question: which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? He said, "The one who showed him mercy." And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." Now, Jesus leaves some openings in here, as he often did, and rightly so, as he told these stories, as he told his parables. He leaves some openings for our minds to fill. And isn't that a beautiful thing about a good story, especially one that comes from the Son of God? Because it can speak into your life and it can speak into mine, and depending on where we may be in that moment, we may be filling those openings a little bit differently than one another. And you know what? That's okay. In fact, I think it's more than okay. I think it's the intention of the parable that it hits you in your heart and it hits me in my heart, and wherever those hearts may be, that kind of guides us toward filling those places in the story with things that speak to us. So he had compassion. He went to him. The other two fellows just passed by. No compassion. No going to him. A man lay half dead in the road, and they walk around him. In fact, they get as far away from him as they possibly can, is what the text sounds like, while still remaining on the road. And I have to think, what is it that drives people? I'm not perfect about this, by the way. What is it that drives us sometimes to be that Levite, for instance? What drives us to be that Pharisee? On the other hand, what drives the Samaritan is something completely different. How can you or how can I look at a fellow human being and be satisfied that they're in a state of crisis? How can we do that? How can we walk by? If you read the bulletin article, I used that German word. I love German. I think if Paul, the apostle, lived today, he would love the German language. And here's why. Because they take one word and they take another word and they smash them together and it makes a whole different word. Paul did that all the time. So I think he would love the German language. So he takes the German takes these two words, Schaden and Freude, and crams them together. And basically, if you haven't heard it or you didn't read the article, basically what it means, it's a psychological thing in human beings where we take pleasure, even delight, in someone else's misfortune. And it's a real thing, isn't it? Oh yeah, it's a real thing. And I've been thinking about this a while. And so I did a little bit of research. Schadenfreude in the Bible. Now the word's not in there. The reality's in there. And the one I came up with that I think is probably the best example and clearly I think the starkest example outside of the cross itself is Psalm 137. If you know your Psalms, you know where I'm going with this. And we don't read this psalm very often, by the way. And when we do, we stop before the last verse or two. But we're going to read the whole thing. This is most likely an exilic psalm. And what I mean by that is that it was written during the time of the exile. And if it was not written specifically during that time, it was definitely written right on the heels of it with all those memories. 70 years, right? 70 years. 430 years. Depending on what all you're talking about. We got all kind of exiles, all kind of enslavements. And so when whoever's writing this Psalm 137 and sitting in the middle of an exile or remembering an exile, exiles, they're not happy times. They're not easy times. It's being taken by hostile peoples. It's living among, for the most part, it's living among the enemy. It's being treated poorly, and that just sounds like, that phrase comes so short of what all was going on. People were dying. People were being tortured and beaten and mocked. The exiles are not happy times. And so somebody writes this painful psalm. By the waters of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. On the willows, there we hung up our lyres. For there our captors required of us songs, and our tormentors mirth. Sing us one of the songs of Zion, and be happy about it. Did you hear that in there? They're sitting among their captors. We don't know if they're bound. We don't know if they're jailed. We don't know any of that specifically. That was going on surely, but their captors look at them and say, we want to hear some of your songs and we want to see you smile when you sing it. How should we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand forget its skill. Let my tongue stick to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy, remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem. How that they said, lay it bare, down to its foundations. Now, to this point, it's a cry for justice, isn't it? It's a cry of memory. Jerusalem, if I forget you, let my right hand forget its skill, etc. Remember God. Remember the Edomites and what they said and how they were gleeful in our time of misery. But then it goes one step beyond. O daughter of Babylon, doomed to be destroyed, blessed shall he be who repays you with what you have done to us. And then he goes there. Blessed shall he be who takes your little ones and dashes them against a rock. I have to imagine that was happening. I have to imagine that those in exile were experiencing those things with their loved ones. And can we see where this is coming from? It's stark, isn't it? But can we see where it's coming from? I'm convinced that had this wish come true, that this psalmist and the congregation, the companions of this psalmist, were not wishing for this to happen also to their tormentors, to their captors, because when and if it did, then they would go alongside them and mourn with them. That's not why the psalmist is asking for this horrible thing to, I will say, also happen to those who are tormenting them. You know and I know why the psalmist is asking for this, because if it occurs, how's the psalmist going to respond? Ha. Ha. Now it's your turn. On one hand, I understand, because I'm a human being, how we can get to a point. When the better angels of my nature, I used that, I think in an email or text to somebody this week, in fact, but when the better angels of my nature, as we say, are in control, I can't understand it. How human beings, how Christian human beings may get to a point where we detest someone so much, we've marginalized someone so much that we can remain satisfied with their discontentment and their pain. And he said, Luke 15, here's the other story I was talking about. There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me. Have you ever heard this one before? Okay. Yeah, it's it's in a series of 3 stories about lost things. This is the climactic story. And I find it interesting. The first 2 are a little bit shorter. They're all in Luke 15. They're a little bit shorter, but they're all kind of if-then stories. If this happened, then what? But Jesus starts this one very differently. He makes a proclamation. There was a man who had 2 sons. Not many, and he divided his property between them after the demand of the younger son. And not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. Have you ever met that guy? Yeah. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs, and he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate. This is how far he has fallen from his father's house to pig slop. And no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. He's got his speech all worked out right. Goes to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion. There's that word again. And he ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But you can almost sense that the father's not even listening. He's experiencing so much joy. And so he starts making these plans. But the father said to his servants, quickly bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. That's the part of the story we really like, isn't it? It's the prodigal, as we call him, the younger son story. But I think it's the rest of the story that we need to pay a lot of attention to. And I know the older son has gotten a lot of ink over a couple thousand years, and he should have. We need to think about this part of the story. It's quite a bit more complex than the other part. But like I said earlier in the sermon, Jesus leaves these openings so that as we read through the story, we can fill them. We can see them in our lives and continue to be transformed. So there's a party going on. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked, I like Richard, I think you read the NIV, what's going on? You can see it, can't you? He's loyal to his father. He's out there doing the work, and he's been out there every day. While his twit little brother is out there spending the family inheritance. I'm out here every day working in the field. And so as he gets near the house, karaoke maybe, I don't know what's going on in there, but there's a party. And so he simply asks, what's going on in there? I didn't get my invitation. And so there's a response. Your brother has come, and your father's killed the fattened calf because, there's a reason he did this, older brother. Your father's killed the fattened calf because he received him back safe and sound. But he was angry, and he refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, look, he can hold it no longer. You see that in the story? This is it. This is it. I'm going to tell the old man like it is. These many years I've served you. I've never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, he who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, son, you're always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this brother, Your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Did you notice what set off the older brother? Really? What set him off? It's that C word that we've seen in both these stories this morning. When he saw his father's compassion toward that loser. When he saw his father's kindness toward his brother. And we don't know, but there's one of these openings in the story, right? So here's how I feel it, at least right now. In my mind, the older brother with the younger brother being off in the far country, out of sight, out of mind, baby. He's out there getting his just desserts. He's getting everything he deserves, and I hope it all falls on him. So I'm going to go about doing my work. I'm going to go about enjoying my friends. And so he's coming in from the fields. And wow, he sees this incredible kindness and compassion, but he interprets it very differently than maybe you or I would. He sees it as favoritism. He considers it surely an affront to his loyalty. In fact, he basically said that to the father. And then he sees it as a call to division and hostility. Your brother who was dead is now alive, and he's home. And as the servant said, he's safe and he's sound. So not only are we going to celebrate, it is the absolute right thing for us to do. It is fitting, the text says, for us to celebrate and to be glad because he's alive. And what was the older brother's response? Anger, and I will not go in there. I will not celebrate. This older brother should have seen that the father loved him in the same way. The father tells him that. You've always been with me. Everything I have is yours. But he didn't see that. The older brother, in fact, I submit, is committed to destruction. You notice the schadenfreude? He seemed to be happy. He seemed to be content as long as the little brother were off somewhere else doing whatever he was doing. But it's when he comes home okay that he becomes angry and he rejects him. And don't miss this in the story. The father is keen on full restoration. Just think about that in a larger spiritual sense. The Father is keen on full restoration. The Father is keen, is excited to bring life where there was only death. Hosea 11, I know I've been up here a minute, but a couple of you told me I went short last week, so whoever said that, this is your fault. So, God is speaking through the prophet here, of course. When Israel was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt I called my son. The more they were called, and implied however here, the more they were called, however, the more they went away. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning offerings to idols, yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them up by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them. I led them with cords of kindness, God says, with the bands of love, and I became to them as one who eases the yoke on their jaws, and I bent down to them and fed them. And you may have heard the preacher say before that Hebrew idiom there basically is painting an image of a baby, of an infant, like little Scotty Joe, and God, Israel's the infant, and God's the one who picks them up and nuzzles them against his neck. This is the image he's trying to get across. They shall not return to the land of Egypt, but Assyria shall be their king, because they have refused to return to me. The sword shall rage against their cities, consume the bars of their gates, and devour them because of their own counsels. My people are bent on turning away from me. In other words, they are committed to destruction, just like the older brother. And though they call out to the Most High, He shall not raise them up at all. And then he says this, how can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I hand you over, O Israel? How can I make you like Admah? How can I treat you like Zeboim? My heart recalls within me. My compassion grows warm and tender. And then God declares, I will not execute my burning anger. I will not again destroy Ephraim, for I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst. And I will not come in wrath. I think a key to that entire reading is that last little bit where God says, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to destroy them again. You know why? Because I'm not you. You would destroy them. So would I. You and I might walk around the other side of the street. You and I might come out of the field after working hard all day, every single day, loyal to our Father. And then hear that somebody's getting celebrated, and you know who that somebody is. God says, that's not me. He said, this is a celebration of life. That's the kind of God that I am. Is it fair to say we sometimes act out of our own nature? Yes. God always acts out of God's own nature. And you see, the call to us, as God always acts out of His nature, the call to us who are in Jesus Christ, and we're being equipped for this, by the way. Have this mind in you, which is yours in Christ Jesus. We've been talking about in Cecily, my Wednesday night class. We've been called to learn to act out of the nature that Christ is instilling in us. People who celebrate life. People who follow these words that are familiar to many from Romans chapter 12. Let love be genuine. Abhor what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Here it is. Weep with those who weep. That's the opposite of the older brother and younger brother, isn't it? He's gotten it backwards. The Father has it right. He knows what's fitting. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, the apostle says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. And as Hosea tells us, that vengeance and that repayment may end up coming in the form of God's compassion and kindness. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. People who imitate in our walk the compassion and the kindness of a God who would send His only Son to die on a cross in the face of people who hated him, who refused to recognize, who were angered by him, who rejected him and walked away. Yet you know what God did? He did it anyway. See, we have a God that celebrates life. We need to be a people who celebrate life.